Everyone else that's been up here has always said when Pastor called, I wanted to say no, but it was Pastor, so I couldn't say no. But I wasn't nervous, I wasn't scared, I wasn't petrified. I was actually ready and willing to give my testimony. Except that he only gave me like 8 weeks to prepare, but I think I did well with 8 weeks. There's a lot here to say. Before I give my message, how many of you like math? Good. I have a really tough math problem for you guys. Right? About 1967, my mom's mom came to America, and soon her husband followed. She had 4 children prior to marrying him, and together they had 1 child. Now here's where it gets confusing. My maternal grandmother's husband is also my father's father. You guys following me? So my grandfather had 10 children with my father's mother and 13 children with 6 other women. So when my parents eventually got married, they were actually stepbrother and stepsister. No blood relation, though. And that 1 child that my grandparents had together is the half-brother of my mother and father. I have over 75 first cousins, and I know them all by name. I have more than 50 second cousins, and I probably know about 90% of their names, and several other third and fourth cousins. So here's the math problem. If Grandpa had children with Grandma A, Grandma B, and plus a few others, how many aunts and uncles do I have? Just a whole bunch, yeah? It's a lot of numbers to take in, but that number will be important a little later on. And we have a picture from our last family reunion. That's just some of us. Not everybody was even there. So the title of my message this morning is Mirror, Mirror, and it begins something like this. Once upon a time, in a not-so-far-away land called Pawtucket, on a sunny Saturday morning, a young lady was preparing her husband's breakfast and packing his lunch for work. They had a little lad who was fast asleep, and they were expecting another bundle of joy. After finishing his breakfast, off to work her husband went. The young lady had spent the day before cleaning the house, so she was still pretty tired. She decided to take her nap since her little boy was still sleeping. Shortly after, she was awakened by her bundle of joy, letting her know she needed to take a trip to the bathroom. She returned to her room and slowly lifted one knee onto the bed, followed by the other, and crawled back into bed, drifting away to a fairy tale in her dreams. A few minutes later, she was awakened again by her bundle of joy. Oh my, she thought, surely I don't have to go again. But indeed she did. So she made her way to the bathroom again. When she returned to her room, she slowly lifted one knee onto the bed, followed by the other knee, and then she heard a wailing scream. She looked over at her little boy, and he was still fast asleep. Startled, frightened, and confused, she thought, it can't be, it's not time yet. She looked back at the base of the window a few feet away from the bed, and there lay a lifeless, soundless child. In a panic, she left the child on the floor by the window, and she walked to the kitchen door. She called out to her sister, who was in the dwelling below. Her sister, who was frightened by the panic in her voice, immediately came to her aid. What happened? Why didn't you call me? Where are the towels? How did this happen? Her sister frantically began looking for towels to pick up the child, but none were to be found. Meanwhile, the child lay lifeless, soundless, by the base of the bedroom window, not a cry or a whimper to be heard. In the midst of all the chaos, the neighbors heard of the young lady's troubles and called a trusted friend for help. When the friend arrived, the child was still at the base of the bedroom window, lifeless and soundless, not a cry or a whimper to be heard. The friend asked, why hasn't anyone picked up this child? I can't find towels. We don't have any towels. Where are all the towels? Cried out the sister. The young lady laid on her bed and sadly replied, there's no need for towels. I don't think the child is alive. That can't be, said her friend. She picked up the child, and to everyone's surprise, it immediately began crying. The young lady's sister, who at this point still didn't find any towels, said to her friend, well, you have to cut the cord. And she replied, "But I have no authority to do so in this land. Surely they will throw me in the dungeon." She looked at the child and realized she had to act quickly. Despite her fears of the dungeon, she gently cut the child's umbilical cord. Soon after, they were on their way to the hospital, and they lived happily ever after. The end. And that is how I was born. Made it into a fairy tale story, but all the facts are really in there. The house that I was born in sadly burned down when I was about 7 months old, so I don't have many baby pictures, but we do have one, I think, right about 7 months. A little tattered, but that was me. And the fact that I fell on the ground and likely hit my head probably explains a lot about my life and the fact that I get headaches all the time. But that was the first sign that God definitely was in my life right from the beginning. And throughout my testimony, I'll share other times when he was present even when I didn't realize it. So I came up with the title Mirror, Mirror because I wanted to show you who I saw myself as growing up and into my adulthood versus who I see myself as now. And the dictionary defines a mirror as a reflective surface that shows a clear image, something that shows what another thing is like in a very clear and accurate way, and something that gives a true representation. And as I pondered on those definitions, I saw who I was, or who I thought I was, as a child, as a teenager, and as a young adult. The image was never clear, and I know now that it wasn't a true representation of who I am. The first place that I remember living in was at 32 Coleman Street. I believe we moved there when I was 3 years old. And there are lots of children in that neighborhood, so it was a fun place to live. I lived with my parents, my older brother, and it was the four of us, or at least I thought, but my mom told me afterwards there were other family members that lived with us at one point. And that's a picture of my mom and dad and me and my brother. One of the things that we loved to do was make Jell-O with my mom. And we used to make it the old-fashioned way. It didn't come in a little container already pre-packed for you to pick up, so you had to boil the water and mix it with the powder. I remember one night when my mom picked up the pan of water to mix it in, the entire pot of boiling water fell all over my legs. I remember screaming. My legs were red and they were warm, but I had no burns. I should have had 2nd or 3rd degree burns, but God was there and he spared me. And as I said, there are a lot of kids in our neighborhood, so we used to carpool to and from school. My friend Beata's dad had a van, so we'd all pack up in there. And in those days, they didn't use seatbelts, so I would sit in the front seat on my friend's lap. And one day, coming home from school, he took a left to go into our street, and as they say, accidents happen right next to your house. I fell out of the car. The car door opened up, and I went rolling onto the street. Again, I didn't have any broken bones. I had a couple of scratches. I didn't even need to go to the hospital. So I know that God definitely was there that day. When I was 7, my parents bought the house that they still live in now. And eventually, about 7 years ago, I moved back there to live on the 2nd floor. When they initially bought the house, my grandmother lived on the 2nd floor. And since she had raised me since I was about 2 months old, I followed suit and went with her. There were still tenants on the 1st floor, so my parents didn't move in right away. My grandmother and I would go downstairs and visit. They were also a Cape Verdean family. And I remember one day I saw a typewriter on the table. I was so fascinated by this typewriter. Pastor claims he doesn't know what that is, but the tenant's son offered to show me how to use it. And I was extremely excited because not only had I never seen a typewriter before, but I wasn't your average child. I was very inquisitive. I always asked questions, and I wanted to know how everything worked, and I wanted to know about everything. So every now and then, I would go downstairs to learn how to use the typewriter. I was very small and short. No surprise there. So I would have to sit on his lap just so I could reach the keys on top of the table. I loved the sound that the bell made when it would reach the end of the page and then you hit it and then swing it back over. And I just was excited by the fact that I was learning to use a typewriter. My excitement grew with every key that I pressed. But unfortunately, his intentions were not to teach me how to use a typewriter, but to take advantage of an unsuspecting little girl. At first, he would just rub my shoulder and tell me I was doing a really good job. And then he would place his hand on my lap. Eventually, he would start reaching up my dress. It happened a few times at the table, and then he would take me to his room. And as I recall, that is when my mirror image became cloudy and not so clear, or so I thought. My parents eventually moved into the first floor, but I continued to stay upstairs with my grandmother. I had my own room on the first floor, but I never really slept there. I actually stayed upstairs with my grandmother until I was 21 years old, and I left. I think I actually made a conscious decision at the age of 7 that I was going to be smart and everybody would like me. I would do well in school, I would study hard, and no one would ever hurt me again. If I'm smart, no one will need to teach me how to use a typewriter or anything else. So that's exactly what I did. I was a straight-A student pretty much my whole life until I got to college, but that's a later story. I kept in mind all those years that if I'm smart, people are going to like me, I won't get hurt, and I won't get in trouble. Then I realized that I can be smart all I want, but I'm still a girl, and I was still raised in the Cape Verdean culture, and that has its own battles. I truly love being a Cape Verdean. I love the food, I love the culture, and I embrace it wholeheartedly. But growing up, I didn't understand it. I felt that being Cape Verdean meant that I was trapped. I now know and I understand why things were, even though I didn't agree with it. Nonetheless, I started to see that my brother and I were treated completely different because I was a girl and he was a boy. He had friends, he would go to their houses, he would play outside, but eventually I was not able to. I remember complaining once that he had not done his chores, and all that got me was having to do all the chores from then on. I never went to a school dance or a sports game or a pep rally or even the prom. I didn't even do extracurricular activities because that was outside of school time. I always wondered what I did wrong, why am I so bad, what's wrong with me? And I asked God, why do I have to live like this? Because I felt like that was not living, I was just existing. But again, I knew I had one way out, so I kept on studying so I could be smart and then everyone would like me. Going to college was my ultimate dream, because not only would I get smarter, but I would have the freedom to do all the things that I didn't get to do in high school. So I graduated 4th in my class and went off to nursing school at Rhode Island College. I had actually started taking classes in April before graduation, so I'd be ahead of the game. But college wasn't a walk in the park like I thought it would be. I didn't realize till I got there that I had absolutely no social skills. And on top of that, the other people there, they were pretty smart, smarter than me. Because of the program that I was in, it required that I live on campus. This didn't go over very well with my family. I just figured, again, it's because I'm a girl, I'm supposed to stay home and follow the same routine. But it was time to end that cycle and start a new chapter. Midway through my first semester, I realized why my family was afraid of me leaving home and going to college. I became pregnant at the age of 18. So much for being smart, I thought. But before I could have time to process what was happening, I lost that child. I woke up on the morning of October 29th, 1990, cramping severely. I went to the bathroom, and a large white mass fell into the toilet. I picked it up, wrapped it in paper towel, and called for my friend to take me to the hospital. It was there that they informed me I had miscarried the baby. I went back to my dorm and I tried to carry on business as usual, but the mind can't overshadow how the heart feels. Compiled with the loss, I was also struggling to succeed in my classes. I started to feel more and more depressed, and I was constantly crying and asking the same questions. Why am I so bad? What's wrong with me? Why can't I do well? I told my dorm mate that I wish I could just take all the pills they gave me at the hospital and sleep forever. The next thing I knew, I was back at the hospital being evaluated for suicidal ideation. I was ordered to see a psychiatrist or I could not return to school. So I started therapy because I knew that I needed and I wanted to be in school. And this is when the image in my mirror really came to light. The person that I had been seeing all these years was revealed through each and every session. And this is what I saw. Ugly, dirty, unworthy, unloved, not good enough, bad, stupid, dumb, fat, but most of all, alone. And the reason I capitalized alone is because, as I said earlier, I had a huge family, but I always felt alone. I was always surrounded by people, yet I was always lonely. No one truly knew who I was or what I was feeling. And within the culture, I didn't feel like it was okay to talk about how you were feeling. You just went about your day and kept it moving. So in actuality, when I'd look in the mirror, it wasn't clear at all. We dug deeper into each session and even into my early childhood. I talked about the typewriter, and then I made an even more startling discovery. See, my mirror image had changed long before that. I always had this thought, and I just passed it off that it was just a dream. But in actuality, it turns out that it wasn't a dream. I had been molested before that, and I'll talk more about that later. Coming to that realization clarified the anger and the resentment that I had for this person all these years, and I allowed it to consume me for 38 years. Once I finished my sessions and completed my freshman year, I moved back home during my sophomore year and worked 2 jobs. But moving back home also still had its restrictions. I did, however, go to my best friend's sister's high school graduation, and that's where I met who I thought was the man of my dreams. And at that time, it was a Latino with a ponytail and slightly red hair. We secretly, and I mean secretly, dated for 2 years, and he promised to take care of me when he heard of my life. Then we decided we were going to have a baby. I planned it out perfectly so my daughter would be born during Christmas break, and then her dad's mom would be watching her so I could go to school the next semester. I moved in with him in South Providence, and then that's when it all began. The yelling, the screaming, the pushing, the stealing, and I couldn't believe what I got myself into. How did I not see these signs beforehand? I was with him for 2 years prior to that. And I realized I couldn't see the signs because he was just my newest escape route. And I soon discovered the man of my dreams and the father of my unborn child was an alcoholic and an addict. Within 1 month of moving in with him, I was in premature labor. I had to drop out of school because I was constantly going into labor while I was in class. I was hospitalized for almost my entire 7th month of pregnancy and then sent home on bed rest. And between the constant sounds of gunshots in the neighborhood and the abuse, I decided it was time to leave, so I left at 8 months. I moved back to Pawtucket in my own apartment. He soon found me and worked his way back into our lives. Things seemed to be going good until I lost the 40 pounds of that I'm not pregnant, I can eat what I want weight, and then I returned to work. I purchased all new clothes and I was very excited about working and going back to school, but he had something else in mind. He was home with our 3-month-old daughter when I got home from work one day. As I was walking in, he was walking out. I asked him where the baby was, and he replied, "You don't have a baby anymore." And then he left. I went into my room and I found all my clothes that I had just bought cut up on the bed with scissors. I frantically looked for the baby in the house and I couldn't find her, and it was only a 4-room apartment. Finally, she started to cry and I found her under the bed. Shortly after, I moved again, and he found me again with the same promises of changing and being a better person. And for almost a year, he did keep that promise. But then my friends started coming around and asking me to go out with them. And that's when I learned how rageful he could really be. The first time I went out, I returned to a barrage of insults, profanities, and an examination to make sure that I wasn't with any other men. And these examinations continued and became more forceful. I decided it was safer to just not go out and instead have my friends visit me at home. On one such occasion, my friend was leaving my house and one of his friends had picked her up. He had returned home drunk and saw his friend's car leaving the driveway. An argument ensued, and this time, instead of hitting me, he decided to punch through a 30-gallon fish tank. Glass was everywhere, including my face. My kitchen walls were covered in blood from floor to ceiling. I called 911, and I thought to myself, okay, this time they'll take him, they'll lock him up, and I'll be safe. But he was back the next day. And every time I called the police, they would tell him to take a walk and cool off. He would only cool off long enough to come back to choke me, push me, or throw me down the stairs. He would never hit me with a closed fist because to him that was abuse and all the other stuff didn't really matter. Many people ask me why I didn't just leave, and for some of you this might be hard to believe, but I'm a little bit stubborn. Maybe a lot of bit stubborn. It was my apartment, I paid all the bills, I put all the furniture in the house, so why should I leave and let him keep everything? Eventually, he assaulted me in Cranston and stole my car. I called the police again to report that I had a stolen vehicle. When the police arrived, they noticed that I had scratches all over me. And he looked at me and he said, "Did he hurt you?" And I said, "Oh, that's just from him throwing me in the bushes." And he said, "Wait a minute. He hit you. He hurt you. Forget about your car. That's material. Your life is more important." Finally, someone believed me and cared about my safety and that of my daughters. That's when he finally left and didn't return for years, and the abuse ended. I was able to continue school full-time. I worked 4 jobs to support myself and my daughter. And after 9 very long years, I graduated with a bachelor's degree in nursing. We have a picture of me. Even though I constantly questioned him, God was certainly there all those years, making me stronger every step of the way. And I know that God was definitely there when Quincy was born. I always call him my miracle baby, and he's always asking me to tell him the story again. And he's over there cheering right now. When I was 4 months pregnant, I was called in to hear my blood work results. I knew it couldn't be good because they asked me to go to the high-risk pregnancy clinic. And I was told that my tests were grossly abnormal. They were sorry to inform me, but my son would have Down syndrome, spina bifida, mental retardation, or his bowels would be born outside of his body. There was also the possibility of stillbirth. It was a lot to take in, but before I could say anything, the clinician recommended that I have a therapeutic abortion. I told her that was an oxymoron. There's no such thing as a therapeutic abortion. I told her that God gave me this child, and no matter what, I would love it the same. She reiterated the complications, and I felt like she was even trying to convince me that this was the best option for me to take. I left there firm in my decision, and I continued with my appointments every 2 weeks. And every week, the news wasn't any better. He wasn't growing, his spine isn't fusing, they couldn't find a heartbeat. And at 7 months, they told me he was no longer growing, that he was going to die in utero, that they could take him out now, or I could just wait and deliver a stillborn baby. I chose to wait, and I continued to pray. And at that time, I didn't belong to church. I was by no means a praying woman, but I always believed in God, and I felt compelled to pray. So I prayed feverishly, not that my baby wouldn't have these complications, but that he would carry me through and my baby, and that I would have the strength to care for him when he was born. We made it all the way through to 9 months, and I went in for my weekly visit, and this time they said his heart rate was dropping, and they had to induce my labor. So I agreed because my due date was only a couple days away. The next morning, I was induced. I decided to have natural childbirth, as I did with my daughter. I was induced with her as well, and I actually fell asleep, woke up thinking I had to go to the bathroom, and the nurse said, "Oh no, honey, I think that's the baby." And I said, "Oh no, I think I know when I need to go to the bathroom." And 15 minutes later, my daughter was born. So naturally, I thought, this only takes 15 minutes. I can do this again. I quickly learned that every delivery is quite different. I was in a lot of pain, but I was willing to take it because my doctor knew that I wanted to have natural childbirth. Unfortunately, my doctor wasn't there that day. He had to leave, and one of his colleagues from the practice came in to deliver Quincy. Now, if you've ever had the privilege of coaching a woman in labor, you know you just agree with her, nod your head, say yes, and do whatever she wants. Well, this doctor was very persistent, and he kept coming in to tell me I need to have an epidural. 80% of women do it. You have to have an epidural. You're in a lot of pain. And I said, no, I can do it. I can do it. Well, the last time he came in, I said, fine, if it means you'll get out of my bleep face, then I will just do it. So I ended up with an epidural. Immediately after, my legs started feeling numb until the point that I couldn't feel them. I told the nurse, and she said, "That's okay, that's normal." And I said, "No, I don't feel anything, and I don't feel my arms either." And my chest started to feel heavy. They paged the anesthesiologist, and I was trying to mouth, "I can't breathe," but nothing was coming out. And the last thing I heard before I fell unconscious was code blue. They performed an emergency C-section because I was becoming more and more unresponsive, and Quincy's heart rate was dropping. When I woke up, I was still sedated, I was in a different room, and no one was around me. I felt my stomach, and it was nearly flat. I thought for sure that I had lost my son. Moments later, a doctor came in and told me he was fine. I didn't actually meet Quincy until we were upstairs on the floor. Quincy, can you stand up for me? As you can see, he's absolutely perfect. There is no hole. was no hole in his stomach or his back. He's got all 10 fingers and 10 toes, no visible deformities. He was just 6 pounds of perfection. According to the doctors, he and I should have both died given the circumstances, but once again, God carried us through. I faced death again in 2009. I woke up on a Saturday, ready to go to work, and had some cramping. I took a couple of Motrin, and I just left and went to work. I tried to ignore the pain, but it got worse and worse. And typically, I can endure some physical pain, but it got to the point where I was actually crying. I called my doctor, and she said, "Don't eat anything, get here as soon as possible." And usually that means surgery. I drove myself to the hospital, and I could barely walk in because I was curled over in pain. Within an hour of getting there, I was unconscious, and again, I was a code blue. I was told there were 8 nurses trying to start an IV on me, all at the same time, but they couldn't because all of my veins had collapsed. Eventually, they were able to access a vein in my neck and hydrate me and give me some medications. Once I was awake, the doctor explained to me that I had bilateral tubal ovarian abscesses and septicemia, which meant my entire bloodstream was infected. She also said that I needed surgery right away. I refused surgery for 2 reasons. I remembered what happened the first time an anesthesiologist was in the room. And secondly, I had purchased 2 tickets for Quincy for his birthday to go see High School Musical, and it happened to be on that night. I was adamant that I would be fine, just give me some medication, I can go home because I need to get him to High School Musical. And I wish I remembered this doctor's name because she was a godsend. She saw and understood how important it was for me to make sure that my child was taken care of. She actually took my phone and went through my contacts and started calling people. She was able to contact Quincy's aunt, who came to the hospital and picked up my keys. We told her exactly where the tickets were, and she was able to take him to High School Musical. She said, "Okay, now that that's taken care of, let me take care of you." I still decided not to go with the surgery, and I opted for antibiotics, and I went to the ICU. Within 24 hours of being in the ICU, I now developed pneumonia. I ended up being hospitalized for 14 days total. And I later found out, again, I should have died, and my case was so critical that it became a case study at Women and Infants Hospital. According to medicine, I shouldn't be here. But the Lord says, "I will never leave you nor forsake you." And once again, he was there to keep his promise. Growing up, my family attended church on special occasions and every so often. But I always believed there was a God and that my life had to be for more than what it had been. I started going to a Catholic church when my daughter was about 5, and it felt good to be in the house of God, but something was still missing. I did some church shopping for a while. I went to every denomination, including non-denominational churches, but still something was missing. My friend Sandra, who was also my hairdresser, always used to tell me about her church and how wonderful it is, and I should come, and I said, "Yeah, someday, I'll go someday." And then my friend Sonia invited me to her wedding on April 12, 2009, and it happened to be here at Mount Hope. Before the ceremony even started, something about this building moved me as soon as I walked in. And Pastor, when you started to speak, I was just hooked. I thought, wow, this guy is pretty cool. He's not holier than thou. He's not boring. I understand what he's saying. And I've been to several weddings because I love weddings. I've even crashed a few weddings. But this one was so unique. It wasn't routine and ritual. There was heart and soul in it, and I could tell that Pastor really knew Sonia and Henry. And I liked it here, and I decided I wanted to come back, and so I did. As Pastor mentioned, I've been coming here for 6 years now. I got involved in everything I could because I wanted to be here as much as possible. When I'm here, I feel safe, I feel loved, I feel whole, and I feel complete. And ironically, when I told my mom about Mount Hope, She said that when she came to America, it used to be on Lonsdale Ave, and that was the first church she ever went to in Yeni. And I can honestly say that as a part of the Mount Hope family, I no longer feel alone. Last year, on November 30th, which is also my daughter's birthday, I was baptized here. It was quite an ordeal. Some of you were here. It's okay, I laugh about it now. You can laugh too. I am petrified of water, for those of you that don't know. So when we were in the office and Pastor was just even demonstrating how he was going to tilt us back and put us in the water, I fell into a complete panic attack. I mean, like sobbing, snots, the whole 9 yards. Had to go into another room, and everybody was coming in to see what happened because I was crying so hysterically I couldn't even speak. I even ended up outside of the building because I'm like, forget it, I can't do this. I had practiced with Frankie going in the baptistry with no water, and Frankie can attest, even then, I was shaking and there was no water in there because I knew there was going to be water in there eventually. So I finally made it into here and into the water with all the screaming and sobbing and wailing. And I think we have a clip of... Yeah, it was something like that. Except I was crying way worse than that baby. And baby's much cuter, but it was pretty bad, to say the least. I do have to say, though, I was going to bring a picture. I didn't bring it, but last week, myself and my kids and my niece, we went to Lincoln Woods, and I was able to go into the water after some time. I only went up to my calves, but nonetheless, I did go in the water. So, besides water, I'm also afraid of guns, and I'm afraid of octopus. It's strange, I know, but it's true. And there are different things that have happened in my life that caused me to be afraid of these things. But I also realized that I had a stalker throughout this. He's been present in my life through most of my trials and tribulations. And in the dictionary, a stalker is defined as someone who stealthily hunts or pursues animals or another person. And I very often felt hunted and pursued, and I couldn't figure out why. Then on the night of my baptism, my stalker decided to reveal himself to me. I had gotten home about 5 o'clock after going out to eat with my daughter, and I had a really bad headache from all the crying, so I decided I was going to go to bed and sleep it off. And about 8 p.m., my mom came upstairs and knocked on the door, so I jumped out of bed to go open the door, but I only made it as far as the kitchen, and the room started spinning. I literally had to hold on to the table so that I wouldn't fall because even the floor was moving. Quincy opened the door, and my mom helped me get back into bed. I started to feel nauseous and hot and cold all at the same time. I lay down and tried to close my eyes, but every time I closed my eyes, the room just kept spinning more and more. I tried to drink water, eat bread, but everything came right back up. I kept taking the blankets off because my body felt like it was on fire, but as soon as I did that, I started to feel cold as ice. My parents wanted to take me to the hospital, but I told them no, it would be fine. So my mom proceeded to put cold cloths on my face, and my dad grabbed all the rosaries and started putting them around me. And Quincy got on the phone and started calling Eugene, Deacon Julia, Pastor, anybody he could get a hold of. And that's when it happened. My stalker made himself visible to me. Now keep in mind, what I'm going to tell you is going to sound very crazy, and if I hadn't experienced it and someone told me, I probably wouldn't believe it myself. But as sure as I'm standing in front of you now, I tell you my stalker was standing in front of me. I was sitting up in my bed, eyes open, and I began screaming and telling my mom, they're here, make them go away. I knew my mom was in the room, I knew Quincy was in the room, but they weren't visible to me. All I could see was 3 white walls, a white floor, no ceiling, and no doors. And in front of me was a glass window, kind of like a storefront. The walls were whiter than I had ever seen white before. They were blindingly white. On the other side of the glass was my stalker and his entourage, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. There was no door for me to get out. Frankie and Pastor had warned the candidates that after baptism we might have some attacks, but I never expected it to be anything like this. Satan himself had come for me. They were in the forms of dragons with massive wings and long tails. It seemed like there were hundreds of them, but the worst was Satan himself. Not only was he a dragon with massive wings, but his lower half was the body of a massive octopus, one of my biggest fears. He and his demons slammed against the glass window repeatedly, trying to get to me. With each slam of the window, my body jolted. I didn't feel it because I was just standing in that room, but my mom described to me that my body kept jumping. Again, my parents wanted to take me to the hospital, but how could I explain any of this to a doctor? They would probably just commit me. Continuously, they slammed into the window, and continuously my body jolted. Quincy began feverishly praying, and he later told me that he was scared, but in the moment he was so calm, and he kept telling me that God will protect me. He told me that the glass window is God keeping all those demons away from me. And after what seemed like forever, it stopped, and I was able to doze off for a few minutes, but then it started all over again. I started screaming again that they've returned. This time the pounding was even harder. And Quincy told me to recite his favorite verse, which we did. Isaiah 41:10. So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you, and surely I will lift you with my righteous right hand. Slowly they started to disappear, one by one, until only Satan was present. So we began to recite the armor of God, Ephesians 6:10 through 20. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Therefore, put on the full armor of God, so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground. And after you have done everything to stand, stand firm then, with the belt of truth buckled around your waist, with the breastplate of righteousness in place, and with your feet fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. In addition to all this, take up the shield of faith, with which you can extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one. Take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God. And pray in the Spirit on all occasions with all kinds of prayers and requests. With this in mind, be alert and always keep on praying for all the Lord's people. Pray also for me that whenever I speak, words may be given to me so that I will fearlessly make known the mystery of the gospel, for which I am an ambassador in chains. Pray that I may declare it fearlessly as I should. The whiter than white walls pulled away from each side and lifted up and covered the window. The once demon-ridden windows were now white as the walls, and Satan was no longer visible. My body stopped jolting, and the room stopped spinning, and it was over. The spiritual warfare I experienced lasted 4.5 hours. My body felt like I'd been hit by a truck. I was physically and mentally drained, but pleased that it was over. 1 Peter 5:8 says, be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour. Satan was displeased with my faithfulness to God, and he came, but he could not devour me. I call Satan my stalker because I realized that all my life he's been present trying to destroy me. But what he didn't realize is that my God was also there, and as I said earlier, he promised never to leave me or forsake me. My God has been there to carry me even when I doubted him. And that is why my life verse is now Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight. Through his Son, Jesus Christ, I've been able to develop a relationship with God that has given me a new outlook on life and a new view of myself. Earlier, I had spoken about the anger, rage, and bitterness that I had carried for 38 years. Well, last fall, I received a phone call that I never expected, and it went something like this. I know you're the last person in the world that would want to help this person, but if anyone can do it, I know it's you. And the caller went on begging for me to help. In God's name, please help. I looked up to the sky and I said, are you kidding me? This is what you really want me to do? You want to help the person? You want me to help the person that hurt me the most in my life? And the answer must have been a resounding yes from God before I could even think of it, because I said yes over the phone. It was by no means an easy task, but I am so glad that I did it. Because after I helped him, my anger, my rage, and my bitterness slowly dissipated. My God, our God, is so powerful that he gave me the strength to forgive him. There's a song called Forgiveness by Matthew West, and in it he says, when we forgive, the prisoner that it really frees is you. Those words are extremely true, because after I forgave him, I felt overwhelming peace, like nothing I've ever experienced. And it's truly amazing how everything else in my life just fell into place, and I truly felt freed. And that brings us to today. Prior to maybe 3 days ago, I would have been done with my testimony, and after reading, I'm on page 28, by the way, after reading it all, I said, my goodness, I didn't put anything in there about my health, and I know everybody wants to know what's wrong with my legs. So as Pastor said, sometimes I'm here limping, walking with crutches, in a wheelchair, wobbly, shaking. Back in 2004 is when this started, so it's been almost 11 years. It just started with numbness and tingling in my legs. And because they couldn't diagnose it with anything else, and I already had migraines, I was diagnosed with hemiplegic migraines, which means when I have a headache, it would affect my legs and cause the weakness. Well, starting September of last year, it just got very extreme, and the episodes were exacerbated. It went from numbness and tingling and limping to uncontrollable shaking in my legs, or not even being able to even stand up. So sometimes I crawl, sometimes I limp, sometimes I'm in a wheelchair, but I've gotten used to it, and I just go about my day until it passes. Sometimes it lasts a week, sometimes a month, sometimes 2 days, and it just goes away and comes back on its own. But honestly, the hardest part for me is not dealing with this illness, but it's seeing the look on everyone's face, especially my parents, when they see me so debilitated. My philosophy is this: God gave me this illness, and if this is his will, then I accept it. He's the almighty, all-powerful healer, and when he's ready, he'll take this affliction from me. So if you see me not walking, not limping, I don't want anybody to feel bad or be sad about it, because I'm okay with it, to be honest. So no matter whether I'm walking, limping, shuffling, or in a wheelchair, I'm going to come to church every Sunday, and I'm going to praise and worship him. I'll be here every Monday to teach the little angels in my youth group, and every Tuesday for Bible study, and every Thursday for prayer service, and back again on Sunday. So who do I see now? I see a clear and true representation of the woman that God created. I see the real me. And when I first heard that song, I thought, wow, if I ever had to write a testimony, I could just use the lyrics from this song because it's truly how I feel. And after Pastor asked me to give today's message, I wanted to see if the woman I am today is also the woman that other people see. So thanks to Facebook, I posted a poll, and I asked this question: if you could describe me in one word, what would it be? And these are the responses: anointed, intelligent, loved, complete, amazing, resilient, phenomenal, special, sweet, caring, selfless, generous, vibrant, honest, organized, perfect, loving, dedicated, strong, determined, understanding, marvelous, beautiful in and out, and blessed. Since I started this walk with Christ, my desire has been to be more and more like him in what I say, what I do, and how I carry myself. 2 Corinthians 5:17 reads, "Therefore, anyone who is in Christ, he is a new creature. The old things have passed away. Behold, new things have come." Since I started coming to Mount Hope, the old me started to fade away without my awareness, and this new God-loving, God-fearing woman emerged. I can't say enough about how this church has truly changed my life. Learning God's true word in a loving and nurturing environment has made all the difference. I've come to understand that no matter what has happened in my life or in your life, there's hope for something better. You and I are not victims. We are victorious in him. Regardless of our circumstances, we can overcome because we can do all things in Christ who strengthens us. The young girl in the mirror who was broken, defeated, and lost has been made whole, victorious, and redeemed. An unknown author wrote, "Many people would be scared if they saw in the mirror not their face, but their character." And I want my character to reflect that of Jesus. So I leave you with these words from a song by Colton Dixon. Let them see you in me. Let them hear you when I speak. Let them feel you when I sing. Let them see you. Let them see you in me.
I want to thank you for taking the time to watch this message. If the Spirit of God has moved you to the place where you need to accept Jesus Christ as your Savior and Lord, we want to encourage you to say this brief prayer. Simply just say, "Dear God, I thank you for loving me. I thank you for sending your Son Jesus to die on the cross for my sins. I recognize that I am a sinner in need of forgiveness and salvation. So I pray, forgive me my sins, cleanse me, make me a child of God, and help me from this day forward to live a life that will be pleasing in your sight." If you have said this prayer, we invite you to email us at welcome@mhcbcimpact.org, or you can call us at the office 401-454-0052. Again, thank you for being with us. God bless you.
Thank you for listening to today's sermon. This has been a production of Mount Hope Community Baptist Church located in Providence, Rhode Island. Learn more by visiting our website, mhcbcimpact.org. Like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter, MHCBC Impact.